The phone rang, and it was my son. He said, "Dad," he said, "Natalie has missed her flight back home."
On May 26, 2005, 124 seniors from Mountain Brook High School in Alabama arrived on the sun-soaked island of Aruba for what was supposed to be the ultimate graduation celebration.
Knowing her, I thought something bad's happened.
Accompanied by just 7 chaperones, this group of teens was ready for a week of fun and freedom. And by most accounts, the teens found just that, with many of them taking part in drinking, clubbing, and room swapping. As their adventure came to a close, however, a seemingly normal vacation twisted into a haunting mystery.
Please help bring her home.
On the last night of their trip, a group of students decided to head to Carlos and Charlie's, a popular bar in the city of Oranjestad. And when the bar closed at 1 a.m., 18-year-old Natalie Holloway left, not with her fellow graduates, but in the company of 3 locals she had just met: Deepak and Satish Kalpo and Joran Sloot. That would be the last time any of her friends would ever see her.
What did it feel like Monday morning when you guys were all getting ready to go and you realized that she wasn't around?
We immediately knew something was wrong.
This is a deep dive into the disappearance of Natalie Holloway and the bombshells that have shaken the case in the years since.
Just, sitting in the back, cruising over to my place.
On the morning of May 30th, as the group prepared to head to the airport for their departure, Natalie Holloway was nowhere to be found. Ominously, her passport and bags were found untouched in her hotel room. The alarming news quickly reached Holloway's mother, Beth Holloway Twitty, back in the States. She, along with her husband and several friends, rushed to Aruba on a private jet to search for her missing daughter. Beth and her group quickly followed Holloway's trail from the hotel to Carlos and Charlie's, and finally to Joran Sloot. Sloot said that he and the Kalpo brothers had driven Holloway to a lighthouse before dropping her back off at the hotel. Sloot claimed to have seen a security guard escort Holloway back into a hotel before leaving. But when Sloot returned to the hotel with a search party to identify this guard, the man was nowhere to be found. The following morning, even though Holloway was not officially listed as missing, more than 100 volunteers made up of tourists and locals scoured the island but were unable to find any sign of her. In the meantime, the news media stepped in, and the story of a pretty American honors student missing in paradise swept the globe. This attention brought significant pressure and scrutiny on the small Aruban police force as they scrambled for answers. Several arrests were made in the coming days. First, on June 5th, based on Sloot's initial story, police arrest a group of former security guards from a nearby hotel, but the men are released the following week as there was no evidence connecting them to Holloway's disappearance. Then on June 9th, the Kalpo brothers and Sloot were taken into custody, their stories growing increasingly inconsistent. The Kalpo brothers now claim to have dropped Sloot off at a beach alone with Holloway, and Sloot claimed to have simply left Holloway alone at that same beach before walking home. On June 17th, a local DJ was arrested and questioned by police, and on June 22nd, Sloot's father, Paulus, was also arrested. Both men are released on June 26th without any charges being filed. The Kalpo brothers were then released from custody on July 4th, again with no charges filed. Authorities chased down leads on purported bone fragments, tested strands of blonde hair from a piece of duct tape found on the coast, and drained a pond where one witness claimed to have seen some men dumping a body. But all of these turned out to be unrelated to the case or completely unverifiable. And then on September 3rd, the last remaining suspect, Sloot, was released from police custody.
Did you kill Natalie Holloway?
No.
And why should you be believed after all the lying that you've done in this situation?
There's absolutely no reason to believe me.
The Kalpo brothers and Sloot would be detained again the same year, but subsequently released because of lack of evidence. Then, on December 18, 2007, the Aruban police would officially close the case without charging anyone. But a bombshell revelation in January of 2008 would bring renewed attention to the case.
Did you try to resuscitate her?
Of course, I tried everything, man. I tried to shake her. I was shaking. I was like, what's wrong with you, man? I almost wanted to cry. But...
A Dutch reporter named Paul R. de Vrie claimed to have captured Sloot's confession on a tape via hidden recording equipment in a car. In the recording, a weed-smoking Sloot alleges that while he was with Holloway on the beach, she had begun convulsing and died, possibly due to an overdose. Sloot claimed that he had been unable to revive her and, with the help of a friend, disposed of her body in the ocean. Based on this new information, the Aruban police attempted to get yet another arrest warrant for Sloot, but their efforts were struck down as the confession was deemed insufficient evidence. Sloot himself later claimed that he had lied on the recording and still maintained that he had simply left Holloway alone on the beach. But this would be just one of many taped confessions that Vandersloot would offer up in the years following Holloway's disappearance. In fact, another even more shocking confession would be released later that same year. This one took the form of an interview with Greta Van Susteren that would air for 3 nights on Fox News. In this confession, Vandersloot spins an elaborate tale about having sold Holloway into sex slavery to a man he had encountered in a casino. Vandersloot claimed to have been paid $10,000 for his role in the scheme, and said that he had last seen Holloway boarding a boat with a man he had brought her to on an Aruban beach. Also included in the story was a recording of a purported phone call between Vandersloot and his father discussing what he had done to Holloway.
Definitely with everything I gave, if you really go and look into it, you're gonna stumble across something that will get you more answers, I'm sure about it.
But as shocking as his confession was, within hours of its completion, Vandersloot sent an email to Fox News claiming that everything he had told Van Susteren was a lie, and the story of selling Holloway into slavery was completely made up. Even that purported phone conversation between Vandersloot and his father was faked, likely with Vandersloot recording both ends of the conversation and changing the tone of his voice to imitate his father's. And because Aruban law doesn't recognize a confession as evidence unless it's written and signed, this stunt would do nothing more than bring further pain and angst to the Holloway family.
Will you even let your mind entertain the possibility that you might not find her?
No, there again, that's not an option.
As for Vandersloot's motive for offering a false confession on a major news station,
people were paying me to make up stories, and I was really good at making up stories. Finally, you start to think, okay, well, if you want something, then I'll tell you whatever you want to hear.
Though Fox News stated plainly that they did not pay Vandersloot for his appearance on the show, they did admit to licensing the media associated with the segment. In other words, they paid for the right to air Vandersloot's phone conversation with his father. And following that same pattern, the next bombshell Vandersloot would offer up in this case was a straight-up money grab. In March of 2010, Vandersloot reached out to a lawyer representing Natalee Holloway's mother, Beth Twitty, and offered to provide the location of Holloway's body if she would pay him $250,000. Working with the FBI, Twitty's lawyer met with Vandersloot in Aruba and gave him $10,000. A second payment of $15,000 was wired to Vandersloot's bank in the Netherlands. After receiving the money, Vandersloot pointed out the location of Holloway's body, an interaction that the FBI secretly recorded. But this information, like everything else provided by Vandersloot, turned out to be false, and no body was found at the location. A follow-up email from Vandersloot claimed again to have made it up. But in a dark twist to this already terrible story, the money Vandersloot received from Twitty would lead to another tragedy. Vandersloot used the $25,000 to fund a gambling trip to Peru. And on March 30th, 2010, exactly 5 years to the day after Natalee Holloway went missing, a 21-year-old Peruvian woman named Stephanie Flores Ramirez also vanished. She had last been seen in the company of Joran Vandersloot. Several days later, her body was discovered in Vandersloot's Lima hotel room. Vandersloot was arrested in Chile on June 3rd and eventually confessed to killing Ramirez. In his account of the murder, he claimed that Ramirez had discovered his association with the Holloway case and had confronted him. He claimed to have just snapped and killed her. His defense team later claimed that the psychological trauma of having stood accused of killing Holloway for so many years was in part to blame for his killing of Ramirez.
I have had 5 years long that people have just been blaming me for something, and yeah, I have a lot of anger built up because of that.
Vandersloot pleaded guilty to Ramirez's murder and was sentenced to 28 years in prison on January 13, 2012. Ironically, the day before his sentencing, Natalee Holloway had been officially declared dead through a judgment in Alabama. In the ensuing years, the Holloway family would continue their search for answers in the case. A docuseries on the Oxygen Network featured a man who claimed to have helped Vandersloot dispose of Holloway's body, but the bone fragments found in the investigation turned out to not belong to Holloway. Likewise, another confession from Vandersloot, this one captured in a Peruvian prison, led nowhere, as like the previous confessions, it was considered inadmissible. But finally, in May of 2023, the Holloway family seemed to have received some real answers in the case.
Today, I can tell you with certainty that after 18 years, Natalee's case is solved.
After years of negotiations, the government of Peru finally agreed to a temporary surrender of Vandersloot to the U.S. so he could face charges of wire fraud and extortion in relation to the money he had received from Beth Twitty in 2010. As part of a plea deal in that case, Vandersloot gave a written account of Holloway's murder. In it, he stated that after Holloway had fought off his sexual advances on the beach, he bludgeoned her to death and then dragged her body out into the ocean.
Joran Vandersloot is no longer the suspect in my daughter's murder. He is the killer.
After hearing the details of the confession, Holloway's mother said, "It's just blistering to your soul, and it hurts so deeply. Even as hard as it is to hear, it's still not as torturous as the not knowing. It was time for me to know." Sloot received a 20-year sentence for the extortion and wire fraud charges, but it will not add any years to his time behind bars, as the sentence will be served concurrently with his Peruvian murder sentence. As to whether he will ever face charges for Holloway's death, it seems unlikely, as the statute of limitations on murder under Aruban law has already passed. Holloway's father offered his thoughts on that fact as he said of Sloot, "While it may not be in a court of law, I believe their judgment is still to come."
We finally, today, we got justice for Natalie. I got the answer I've been searching for the past 18 years.